Dear crypto community and blockchain buddies across the globe, welcome back to Cryptonites, the no BS blockchain built with the community and for the community. And today we're live from the Crypto Compare Digital Asset Summit, and we have an amazing guest, a mind-blowing guest, Andreas Antonopoulos.
Oh, hello.
What a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much.
Your talk just now was mind-blowing. I'm going to be very honest with you. I was tearing up a little bit just because I related.
I was too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, on stage.
What brought those emotions out of you? I mean, I think it was really cool.
It's hearing the stories of people who are affected the most from many of the negative things that happen in today's system of finance that not only have given me the power to talk about things, but also they touch me on a personal level, and I can't help but express that emotion when I'm on stage. You know, I honestly talk about things that I believe in, and so it comes out, it leaks.
At the last conference I attended, after I gave a speech decrying the lack of security and financial inclusion, a young man came to me and said, "This really spoke to my personal story." Young man in his 20s has been living in Western and developed countries for the past 15 years, has not been able to open a bank account in 15 years. Every time I write my name and place of birth in the application, the process is already ended. I was born in Iran. I didn't choose that. I didn't do anything. I pay my taxes. I have a job. All I want is to deposit my paycheck in a bank account so I can buy groceries. For 15 years, I've been unable to do that. That is the face of the unbanked.
Yeah, it was really, really emotional. I was actually looking at people in the crowd, and I could see that they were getting emotional as well. Do you mind telling us a little bit about this specific story about the underbanked?
Yeah,
I believe it was a Persian person, someone from Iran.
Yes. So you know, people think the underbanked is basically something that happens in Africa or something that happens in parts of Southeast Asia. It's a kind of impersonal thing. And one of the things I wanted to emphasize at this conference is that as you walk around the city of London here, you're surrounded by people in your community who serve you, or maybe who work with you, who are unbanked or underbanked. And I met this gentleman in Berlin just last week, and I was doing a talk about the unbanked, and he came to me and said, you know, your story speaks to me personally. I've been living in Western and developed countries for 15 or 16 years now, and I can't get a bank account. And it's because as soon as I write my name and place of birth on an application form, it's over. It's already over. I've done nothing wrong. I didn't choose to be born in Iran. I have no connection with the government there. I live in these countries. I'm a taxpayer. I'm an upstanding citizen. I work hard. All I want is an account where I can deposit my paycheck so I can go buy groceries. And I can't get it because of something that happened to me when I was born that I didn't control. I didn't ask for this. I didn't do anything wrong. And as he was telling me the story, there were just like tears coming from his eyes. And I was weeping too. And it hit me so hard. And I've heard stories like that again and again and again. You know, people don't realize 18% of the population in the United States is underbanked. That's 60 million people. We need to not only understand that this affects our neighbors and people all around us, but that also banking and access to financial services is not a privilege. We've turned it into a privilege, but it's not a privilege. It's a fundamental requirement for a decent and honorable life where you can take care of your family. And the idea that we deny it of billions of people out there, based on this crazy idea that if we do enough totalitarian surveillance, we'll eradicate crime. That is a crime. It's a crime that condemns people to poverty all around, and we're doing it to others. So, you know, that's an important message, I think. It's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about cryptocurrency, because cryptocurrency doesn't care who you are. There is no vetting. The vetting has already been done. If you are human, you have a right to participate in the human economy. And that is something that most of us take for granted. And when you meet people who can't do that, it's a really powerful moment.
What does it mean to be unbanked? The World Bank defines unbanked as the 2.5 billion people who have absolutely no access to financial services and live in cash-based societies. Conveniently, they only count heads of household, meaning the spouses and children are unimportant in this calculation.
Your passion is absolutely contagious, to be very honest. Even through the videos, I feel it sometime. And you've been passionate since 2012, is that correct? Where you started?
Yeah, I mean, from the moment I got into this, but what really changed the trajectory of my work, I got into it in 2012. I was excited about the elegance of the technology. I didn't yet quite understand the global impact that this would have. And part of the reason I didn't understand it is because I came from financial privilege, right? I had access to, I've never lived in a situation where I didn't have access to all of the banking services I could consume, right? You know, when I was a student in London, they'd give you a toaster if you opened a bank account with NatWest. You know, they were competing to get students to open accounts just so they could then cram you with overdraft fees, of course, and all of that. But the bottom line is that I had access to all of these things. When I went to Argentina in 2013, and I spoke to Argentinians who live in a situation where financial crises have happened, you know, 2 or 3 times in a generation, destroying half the wealth of the country. Being set back where half your savings disappear overnight, that is a cruel thing, and they have no control over it, right? So when I talked about crypto there, they got it, and they reflected that back to me, and they gave me a whole new perspective. And then I came back to the United States, and I had a conference in Las Vegas, I remember, with a whole bunch of VCs and investors and bankers who were talking about legitimizing crypto through regulation, and I went off. I just had probably the most passionate talk I'd had up to that moment. And I'm like, who are you to claim legitimacy? You know, banking license means the license to money launder with impunity. You just foreclosed on 8 million people in the United States. You want to talk about legitimacy? Half of you should be in jail. Crypto doesn't need your permission. Didn't ask for your permission, and we'll keep doing our thing. So, you know, to me, refocusing and understanding this is about the other 6 billion. This is about delivering universal, basic access to financial services. And at first it's basic, but then it's not just basic. It becomes very powerful. We need to do that. We have a moral obligation to do that, and we have a moral obligation to resist the cynical attempts to break that in order to satisfy some false sense of security.
That sounds absolutely amazing, because many people, when they talk about blockchain, it's always the same pitch: disintermediation, removing the middleman, which is exciting if I'm working as a head of corporate finance or trying to cut costs for a company. But today, your talks seem to be really crafted around financial inclusion.
Yes.
Is that what you're doing to resonate with the younger people? Or because I feel like this typical pitch doesn't really resonate with the youth or on the social impact and why this decentralization really matters too.
Well, this typical pitch, if you look behind the words and you think carefully about what they're saying, fundamentally it's about replacing the current layer of leaders with themselves. They don't want to change the system. They just want to put themselves at the top of the pyramid, right? So it's a very greed-driven and personal ambition and ego-driven message. I think, especially among young people who have now realized that a lot of the financial system is rigged against their interests, right? We have a generation now that has basically been ripped off by their elders and delivered a planet in chaos. And we're like, good luck with that, you know. My parents' generation, the statistics, if you look, it takes like 350 hours of minimum wage work in the 1960s in order to afford a 4-year college education. And today, it takes 4,800 hours of minimum wage work to afford that, right? And we saddle people with this debt, and we're like, well, why aren't you working harder? Why aren't you buying homes and consuming so it can drive the economy? Why? Because our future was stolen, right? Millennials understand that the system as it is today, with its massive inequality, with its massive reliance on debt, is fundamentally broken. Now, what that does is it puts them slightly in the position to understand that what they're experiencing now for the first time in this generation is actually the reality for billions of people forever. It's not new. And that little glimpse, really, if you can emphasize that and understand and empathize with those people, then it becomes very powerful, I think.
It does seem like a very powerful thing. Have you ever thought about, I mean, you have so many reasons to back up blockchain and Bitcoin, and you've done it through thousands and thousands of talks. In terms of Bitcoin itself, like among all the facts, data, and knowledge that you have on Bitcoin, if you had to list the top 3 most important things about Bitcoin to resonate with the same crowd, with those millennials, and to get them to want to be a part of this decentralized movement, are there any specific examples that you like to give them?
Absolutely. So the first one is you have to understand that the powerful aspect of this technology is not blockchain. Blockchain is just a data structure. Open public blockchains that are decentralized matter, and the reason they matter is because decentralization delivers personal independence, empowerment, and freedom. Decentralization can be encompassed very, very simply in a simple slogan, which is not your keys, not your coins. You have to take control of the keys in order to be able to express your independence, right? If somebody else is holding your cryptocurrency for you, that's just banking with a different shell. The main thing about this is that individuals can independently take control of their finances, and they can decide what software to run, which consensus rules to follow, and then they become a participant in the security of the system, and that's empowering. So that's the most important thing to realize about this technology.
Those are really amazing points, and like you said, it seems like we have to have principles and values that are aligned with the people out there when it comes to identifying myself as someone who wants to be a part of this movement. And there's something that you do so well. You explain it through the 5 pillars.
Yes.
I love the 5 pillars. That's something that I came across about 1.5 years ago, and since then I felt like it aligned with me as a person.
Okay.
Do you mind sharing with everyone what are the 5 pillars and what they are and why they're important to you as a person? Yeah.
So the 5 pillars are basically a set of tools to understand whether what you're talking about is really one of the interesting systems that I prefer to call open public blockchains, to differentiate from the generic term that has become so insidious and meaningless, which is blockchain. Everybody does blockchain today, and it doesn't mean anything. So I talk about open blockchain. And to elaborate on that, to me, a blockchain is powerful if it's open, public, neutral, borderless, and censorship-resistant, right? And what do those things mean? Open means that anyone can access it without permission, without vetting, without identity. They can participate in it just by downloading software. Nobody can put up barriers to access. Nobody gets to vet or authorize or give you an account. You don't need any of that. It's public. All of the information is available for everyone to validate and verify for themselves without appealing to another authority. You can build APIs on it. You can develop new software that connects to it. You don't need permission to do any of that. You have full access to all of the capabilities of the system. Borderless. There are no borders. There were never borders. That's a fiction. The world is one place. We are on one boat that carries humanity through space, right? And borders are fictional things that just divide us. On the internet, there are no borders. On cryptocurrency, there are no borders. It doesn't care where you're from, where you were born, where you are currently residing or passing through. Borderless is really important. No other system of money today, other than perhaps physical gold, is truly as borderless as digital cryptocurrency. Censorship-resistant, right? Censorship-resistant means that no matter what other people think, you can make a transaction. you can make a transaction and no one can stop you from making a transaction. If there are gatekeepers, if there are controls, if some people are allowed to make transactions, if some transactions are permitted and some are not, depending on what you're trying to buy or who you are or where you were born, then it's not censorship resistant. Now, that doesn't mean completely censorship proof. Censorship can occur, but it can occur for limited times and in limited places. You can't censor all of it all the time, just like the internet. Some of it will go down now and then for limited time, but you can't turn off all of the internet all of the time.
Yeah.
And finally, neutral. Neutral, just like internet neutrality. The internet routes packets no matter where they come from, no matter where they're going, no matter what the content is inside. It doesn't care. Source, destination, and content are not relevant to the routing of the system. That applies to open public cryptocurrencies and blockchains like Bitcoin and like many others that copy the same model and have been inspired by Bitcoin. Neutral means it doesn't matter what source is sending a payment or participating in a smart contract or doing a transaction of any kind. It doesn't matter what the destination is. It doesn't matter what the value or content of that transaction is or what its purpose is or what it's buying. Completely neutral. Your payment will be routed. Those are the fundamental principles that make this a revolutionary, disruptive, empowering technology that can change our world. Anything less than that, it may be useful to some. It might even have an impact on some financial services, an improvement of their incredibly centralized systems. To me, it's boring. It's irrelevant. It is like your corporate internet compared to the internet, the global network that we all participate in, right? Your corporate internet, it's there. It's boring. Nobody cares, right? And people are trying to build these permission blockchains that strip away all of the interesting capabilities so they can pretend as if they're doing something novel, but it's really business as usual disguised with this new terminology. And you can play with that if you want to. For me, it's boring, but people need to have the tools to understand the difference between the two.
So beautifully put. These 5 pillars, I feel like it should be a reference. If there was a DAO Bible, I think those 5 pillars should be in that Bible. And speaking of which, would you think that if a company can tick those 5 pillars, are they classified as a DAO, or do you need a little bit more to really become a DAO? It's a very complicated topic, and a lot of people disagree.
I think it's important to realize that these principles are not the only principles that matter, right? They're just some of the most important ones, but there are others like immutability. And immutability derives from many of the other principles, but it's also a very powerful principle in itself. And we're also discovering other principles. So for example, programmability. You can't do programmability without neutrality, censorship resistant, open borderless operation, of course, but it's also an important principle. The other thing to realize is that apart from all of the dimensions that we're still exploring and discovering, these are dimensions. They're not binary. It's not you are decentralized, you're not decentralized. You are censorship resistant, you're not censorship resistant. It's how much you will have on each. Think of it as a scale, right? And we're actually probing how far we can push this scale. Can we make things even more decentralized than today? There's no absolute yes, no in decentralization. There's only relative. Are you more decentralized than something else? Are you more censorship resistant? Are you more neutral or less neutral? So if you think of every project as perhaps scoring a certain grade on all of these dimensions, they're also not static in time. These are evolving systems. You can start off very decentralized and then become less decentralized. Maybe then you bounce back and become more decentralized again. This is a moving target, right? What we need to do is understand what's important at a very basic level, explore what else we can build that's also important, and then try to maximize the principles we care about by adopting the projects that we feel best express those, right? So, and that's not easy. I'm not going to be able to give you a score and say, well, this blockchain is 5.4 decentralized, on the Nakamoto scale. There's no such thing, right? These metrics are very subjective. You have to do your own research and you have to decide, does this serve the purposes that I need to use this for? Does it empower me as an individual? Does it protect my sovereignty, my independence, my freedom? and use these criteria in order to evaluate the project that you're interested in.
Those are really, really good points. Like you said, it's really hard to measure, right? What is
course.
decentralization? And there seems to be many clashes and disputes and arguments between some figures because you're not decentralized, and they're looking at different aspects.
Right. They're looking at different aspects and different trade-offs, and it's highly subjective.
Highly subjective.
So, you have to think about this from the perspective of what's important to you, right? This is a technology that empowers individuals. The only perspective that matters is yours. So what is the best blockchain for you? How does it best give you the capabilities you need to do the things that you care about? You have to be careful not only to make these decisions yourself, but also to not listen to others and to not give others the authority or elevate them to a position where they can tell you what is right and what is wrong when it comes to understanding those principles. Appeal to authority is one of the things we're trying to disrupt and change with these technologies, right? These technologies are against appeal to authority. They're about you, through the choice of your software, authoritatively verifying the blockchain yourself. You are the authority in these systems. Each of us is the authority. There is no central authority. And that also applies to the ideas and how you evaluate them.
Beautifully put, beautifully put. Speaking of which, jumping back to something you said in the previous question, you talked about the world is borderless.
Yes.
And it kind of reminds me of the book Sapiens. You've probably heard of.
Yes, I've read it,
yeah. And he talks about how whatever is not biological does not exist. It's pure belief.
Yes.
A company does not exist. A security does not exist.
Countries
Borders
don't
do not
exist.
Countries don't exist.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? It's a very innovative mindset or approach of viewing the world. Like, would you agree with this type of view of?
I mean, absolutely, but it's not just innovative, it's essentially ancient in its origins, right? The problem is that our cultures have mostly forgotten the things that have been known for millennia. There's nothing new about this. And in a way, some of the Greek philosophers are partly to blame for this. So, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, they actually created this idea that there's a duality, that the mind and spirit are separate from the body, that there is a perfect idealized world that exists separate from the material world. And they created this dichotomy, the heavens perfect, the world below corrupt and fallible and mortal. Turns out none of that really exists. The material world is the world. We live in it and we are all part of it indivisibly. That pure idea that everything is biology, everything else is fiction, right? Useful fiction. It's an evolutionary imperative to develop the social structures, belief systems, and ideas that help us succeed as a species, but not to mistake those ideas for reality, right? And when those concepts no longer work for us, we can discard them. There's nothing sacred about any idea ever. Every idea should be questioned. Every idea should be challenged. And if necessary, discarded. It's funny how people grow up and they're used to certain things around them, right? And this is very true of money, right? When you grow up as a kid, you see the money of your country, you read the history of your country, and you believe that that's how it's always been, that that's the right way to do things, that it can only be done one way. And then when you're presented with an idea that's different from that, it causes cognitive dissonance. Like, well, how about we do money without governments? It was like, well, how could you possibly do that? I mean, if the government isn't the creator of money, how do you know if it has value? It confuses people, right? Yeah. Because the mistaken idea is that somehow money derives its value from the permission or authority of government. That's entirely false. And it's not backed by any science or any economic disciplines. The bottom line is that money derives its value from us using it, from the social compact of economic use. And there's no reason why it has to come from government versus another social compact established in software. So you have to break these ideas first before you can introduce new ideas. And people are threatened by that. So it's often scary to see that something you believed in isn't actually true.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I've had many people like saying that digital assets or digital currency doesn't work. And I would ask them a simple question. Oh, really? Have you ever used a credit card?
Yeah.
Simple things like that, just to make them realize that we're already using digital payments and we're using systems online.
Just centralized ones instead
of decentralized.
exactly.
Exactly.